Hey there, this is Mahmoud and welcome back to my another YouTube video tutorial. Today I will discuss some important ECMAScript 6 JavaScript features which we mostly use when we develop application in React or React Native. So today I will discuss the following thing. So if you already know this ECMAScript 6 features and some ECMAScript 2017 feature, you can skip this video. But if you do not know these features, then you definitely should watch this video and learn the concept. Otherwise, you cannot work on React Native or React application development. So let's start. We will write and run our code in Visual Studio Code Editor, and to do that, there is an extension. So if you did not use this extension before, just open your Visual Studio Code Editor and then go to the view menu, and here you will see extensions, and here if you search here code runner, you will see code runner and by Junhan, and this extension you have to install and activate. So in my Visual Studio it automatically activated. So if you activated this extension, you can run not only JavaScript code but also PHP, Python, C++, Java and many other programming language code as well. Now close this window, and for example here in the demo.js file I type console.log var let and const, and to run this code I just have to click this run code button, and here you will see that there is output var let const, and in case you want to clear the output, just click this button. Before ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2015, we used to define variable using var keyword. So for example, var name equals Mahmoud, and if we just print this name, we see the output Mahmoud. Okay, so now suppose I am creating a scope using braces. So that means this is the part of the code. So this is a new scope. So if I run this code again, still it works, right? But what happened if I try to print the variable outside of this scope? If I run, you see Mahmoud now showing 2 times. That means we can access this name variable outside of this scope, but it should exist only in this scope. So this is the problem of var keyword or var to define variable using var. So we have to solve this problem by using let and const keyword. Now in the most of the JavaScript code, you will see either const or let to define a variable. So for example, I define a variable const name equals Mahmoud, and I also define another variable const age equals 33, or I just change it to let. So now if I print console.log name plus age, and if I save and run this code, I am seeing Mahmoud 33. So basically when you're defining a variable, now you can use const or let keywords. So what is basically the difference between const and let? So const actually the short form of constant. So if I want to change the variable like name to different name, I'm Asan, and try to run this code, you will see it will be showing an error because assignment to constant variable is not possible. So when you define a variable using the const keyword, basically you are embracing the immutability data structure. So that means this variable value cannot be changed. But if I just want to change the age, suppose 34, and run, you see there is no problem. So when you want to use a variable or define a variable, and if you think there is no chance to modify the data, so it's better to use const, and if there is any chance to use immutable data, then you should use let. Now come to the scope point. So if I define these 2 variables inside this scope, and if I run this program again, you see now it is showing error, because when you are using scope using the braces, that means the variable exists only in this scope, not outside of the scope. So if I move these 2 lines of code here and run the code, you see now no problem. So this is the basic difference between const and let and with var. Now one important thing you have to remember, if we declare a variable like const numbers, and I put an array 1 2 3, so this is an array which is bind to this number, and if I want to add another number in this array, numbers dot push suppose 4, and if I just type console.log numbers, save the file and run, you see it is showing the updated value. So 1 2 3 during the initialization, and then we push the value 4, it's okay. So you may ask me that why now we can change the data. So basically the thing is that when we defining an array or an object and bind it to a variable, we can update the values of that array or object. It does not matter whether the the variable name is initialized using const or let, it does not matter. But if we just want to try another thing like numbers, and we want to initialize another array like 2 3, and if I save this file and run this code, you see now it is showing an error. So that means you cannot reinitialize another array or object with a variable that is defined using const, but you can update or modify the existing values of an array or object when it is defined using const. So this is a very important thing you should remember. An arrow function expression is shorter form of regular function expression. So before ECMAScript 6, we used to define function like this way. So we defining a variable square regular and binded this function which takes only one parameter and returns the multiplication. So if we run this program, you see it is showing 25. So this is okay, there is no problem. But if we define many of this function, we always have to use this function keyword which is more verbose. So the ECMAScript 6 is standard introduce a shorter form of this function. So let's define this shorter form. So we are writing const square arrow, after equal sign, instead of using the function keyword, we just only use this parenthesis. So parenthesis and then the parameter, then before the braces we will use equal sign and greater than sign to make it an arrow, and then we use the braces like our regular function, and here we will type return n into n, similar like our regular function. So if I just copy paste this message and just change the function name here and put 7 instead of 5 and run this program, you see it is showing 49, but this function looks a shorter form of this regular function. Now we can make it shorter than this. So if there is only one parameter, it is optional that you have to put the parenthesis beside the parameter. So if I run this program, it still shows the same output. Now as in this arrow function, we are only returning the parameter multiplication parameter, that means only one statement, so we can make it even shorter. So we just remove this braces from start and in, and also remove this keyword return, and if we run this program, you will see still it's showing 49. So that means when you have one statement, you can just use the implicit return. So implicit return means when you do not use the braces, the arrow function automatically returns the value after the computation. So here we can make an inline statement which automatically return, and we can use this arrow function to get the value. So this is even shorter form. And now there is another thing. If you use two values, for example, let's change this name to sum, and here we want to pass two value a, b, two parameter, and we want to return the sum of a plus b, and we change this method name here as well and pass two value 2 and 2. So here you see now it is showing an error. So that means when you use more than one parameter, you must have to put parenthesis beside the parameters. Now if I run this program, it shows 2 plus 2 4, so there is no problem. Suppose our arrow function does not return any value, but instead of this it's want to do any task. For example, we want to define a function, just const hello world, and we want to put just console.log hello world. We want to print this statement on the terminal, and we just call this function hello world, and if we run this program, you see the oh, I did not save this file, so I have to save this before I run. If I run, you see the hello world is printing on the terminal. So that means when you do not have any parameter, you you must have to use the parenthesis. That means you cannot just remove this parenthesis and run this program. In that case, it will show an error. So normally what happens when we use only one parameter, we can omit this parenthesis, right? But when there is no parameter, you must use the empty parenthesis. It is very important to remember. In ECMAScript 6, we can assign default value in function parameter. For example, we are defining a function const person details, and this is an arrow function that will take two parameter, name and country. So, and this function will print console.log name plus country. So suppose we are calling this function person details, and we are first time passing name, suppose Mahmoud, and country Bangladesh, and if I run this program, it is showing Mahmoud Bangladesh. That's fine. So suppose we are developing an application where most of the people are from Bangladesh, then we can do what we can do, we just put a default value in this parameter. So here we can put this Bangladesh thing in this function parameter. Now if I put just the first parameter and call this function and run this program again, you see it is showing Mahmoud Bangladesh. But if I want to put different country, suppose person details and Imon, and the country is suppose Malaysia, and if I run this program, you will see now it is showing Imon Malaysia. That means if there is we pass any value, that will be exchanged by the value we provided. But if there is no value is given, for example in the first calling we do not provide the country, in that case the function will check that if there is any default value assigned with this parameter or not. If there is value, then the function will use that value. So this is the default value in function parameter in ECMAScript 6. JavaScript classes are syntactic sugar over existing prototype based inheritance. So like other language, if you want to define a class, you have to use class keyword and then class name. So for example, here I type class address and defining a new type, that is address. So then I can also similar like other programming language, I can use constructor. So what is constructor? Constructor is basically when you are creating an instance of that class, if you want, you can pass some value to initialize the object. So for example, here I am defining a constructor and I want to pass city and country, and I want to add this city and country to this class instance property. So to do that, I have to type this dot city equals city and this dot country equals country, and then I want to define a function. So when you define a function inside a class, that is called method. So in this case I am defining a method and the method name will be print, and what it will do, it will just print these two values. So console.log this dot city and console.log this dot country. Now let's instantiate this class object. So to do that, I have to define a variable like const address. So I am creating an instance of address from this class address equals, you have to use new keyword to create an instance of a class. So I have to use new and type address, and I want to pass this two value. So I will type for example Dhaka Bangladesh, and so basically this a new instance of this address class is created here, and that instance is binded to this variable named address. So if I want, I can now access this print method from this instance. So I have to just type address dot print. If I save this file and run, you see now it is showing that address instance has two value, and that is printed by this print method. One thing here you have to remember, that you cannot define multiple constructor in a class. You can only define only one constructor in a class. Let's say another example. In this example, I am defining a class named point, and where in the constructor I am passing x and y value and putting this value to this class instance, so using the this keyword. So let's define a static method. So first define then discuss. And to define static method, you have to type static, then method name. For example, here distance, point A, point B. So what is basically static method? So previously when I have shown that I am defining a normal method, I can only call that method using the class instance. But when you define a static method, you no longer need to create an instance to call this method. So for example, if I want to call this method, I just use this class name point and I put a dot and just use this method. So this is the benefit of a static method. Sometimes it is also called class method. So here what we are doing, we want to create a point class which will take a coordinate xy value for a point. For example, we can pass this point A, and also we will create another object with another coordinate x and y value, and then we want to check the distance between that 2 points. So in that case we can use this static method. So let's define the function. So const ptx equals math.power, and here I will type point a dot x point b dot x minus point a dot x, and the power will be 2. Okay, so basically there is a mathematics formula which we are defining here. Const pty math dot power point b dot y minus point a dot y 2. So the distance will be now const dt math dot square root of ptx plus pty and return dt. So now we defining this static method. Let's use it. So first we want to create 2 point. So const pt1 equals new point, and we passing 5 and 2, xy value for point 1 object, and another object pt2 equals new point 10 3 or 4 whatever. And now we can calculate the distance of pt point. I'm just using the class name, then putting the dot, and I can use the distance method, which is a static method, pt1 pt2. Now I can type console.log distance of pt. Now save the file and run. You see it is showing point pt1 object and pt2 object distance in xy value using the mathematics formula. So this is the benefit of a static method. So sometimes when you need to call a method without instantiating a class, you just use a static method. Let's see another example. In this example, we will be defining subclass from a superclass. So here we are defining a class that is named car, and we can pass brand and type value as a constructor, and we can use the print method to check the value. So let's define another car. So I am typing class Honda, and as a Honda is also car, so we can extend this feature. That means we can use this feature which is already defined. So I type extends, and this is called inheritance in object oriented term. Extends car. So basically now this Honda, this class extending this car class, or in other terms you can say that Honda class is inheriting this car class. So here the car is the super class, and in C++ language it is called base class, and this is called subclass or derived class. Anyway, so in JavaScript we will call this superclass and subclass. So when the superclass has a constructor, you must define a constructor in here. So I will type constructor, and then in this case I want to take another value that will be the model value. So before that I also need these 2 value to pass from here to the superclass. So I will type brand type and then model. So when from subclass you want to call superclass method, superclass constructor, you have to use the super keyword. So here super means I am calling this constructor. So here I will pass brand and type, because our superclass is only taking these two value, right? And then I have to type this dot models equal model. So that means I am passing and storing this model value within this class instance. And now we define another method here, print method. And here I also want to see all the features. So in that case I want to call this car class method which we are inheriting here. So to do that you have to use the super keyword, and then you can use the dot sign and call the super class method, and then I will print my class property. So here model, this dot model. Okay, now we can instantiate this Honda class object like const Honda, new Honda, I pass Honda, then sedan type, and model is Accord. And now if I call honda.print, save the file and run the program, you see now all the values are showing. So this is how we can create subclass in JavaScript in ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2015 by extending the superclass. ECMAScript 6 introduced set object. So using set object we can store unique values of any type. So for example, we are defining a const set numbers, and to create a set object we have to use the new keyword and then put the set keyword, and within parentheses we can pass suppose an array 1 2 3 4 again 1. And now if I print this console.log set numbers and run this program, you see it is showing 1 2 3 4. So if you see that I pass 1 2 times but it only store 1 time. So this is the uniqueness of set object. Suppose we want to add another value, set numbers dot add, and this time 10, and we again want to print the console log, and if we check you see it is showing set 1 2 3 4 10. 10 is printed, that means 10 is added to the set object because it's unique value. But if I just put it 1 again or suppose 2, and our set already has 2, so if I run this program again, you see in that case 2 will not be added at the end or anywhere. So this is the uniqueness of set, that you can store unique values in set. In object initialization, ECMAScript 6 provided a shortened feature. So this shortened feature we can use if the variable name and the property in the object name is same. So for example, let's define a variable const name equals Asan. So in ECMAScript 5 or before ECMAScript 6, what we can do, if we want to define a object, so for example I'm defining an object var person equals curly braces, and here I am adding a property. The property is name is name, and the value we want to pass is this value, right? So name. Now if I want to just print this person.name, save the file and run. Okay, it is showing correctly. So this is basically in ECMAScript 5 when we want to assign a value to a property in a object, and the same name we can do like this way. But in ECMAScript 6 there is a shortened feature. So for example, in ECMAScript 6 what we can do, we use the ECMAScript 6 feature, like here we are using constant, and here as basically this variable name and the property of this object is same name, so we just use one name. So for example, here we can use just name and then it will work. So if I just clean this and save the file and run, you see it is still working. So this is the new ECMAScript 6 feature, that is called shorthand property name. There is another initialization feature introduced in ECMAScript 6. So before ECMAScript 6 we can define function within an object like this way. So for example, the function name, for example get name, and if we use ECMAScript 5 we have to use get name then colon, then we have to use the function keyword, and then we can use this function like this, return this dot name. And for example, here I am just using person dot get name. Okay, if I clean this and run, it works. Okay, so this is basically the ECMAScript 5 feature. So if you want to define a function within an object, you have to use the function keyword after colon sign of the function name. But in ECMAScript 6, you just, what you can do, you just remove this function keyword and also this colon keyword, so it makes much simpler and elegant. So if I just clean, save and run, you see it works. So now you can just use this shorthand method name in object when you want to initialize an object with a function. Computed property name is another ECMAScript 6 feature. So for example, we are defining a key, const key plus 1, and we are defining an object, const object equals, and here we want to put this dynamic key. So we have to use this square bracket, and here we can put this key, and for example here we just put a data string. So let's run this code in the terminal. So I have to type object and then key. If I save this file, clean the out terminal and run, it shows data. So right now you do not see any benefit, but sometimes it may happen that in program you have to generate this key dynamically based on some condition. So you are not sure that what the key will be. In that case, you can use this computed property name as a key. Destructuring is another nice feature in ECMAScript 6. So it is basically an easy way to access the object property or arrays property. So for example, we have an object like this const person, where we have two property, name and country. So normally what we do, if we want to access this name property, we can just use person.name, right? This is one way, or this is the way we use before ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 5. We can also define a variable like this, var name, then person.name, and then we can use this name variable where we need it. But in ECMAScript 6, there is a short syntax. So for example, if we want to access this name or country, we can write this way, const, and we use curly braces, and then here we suppose we want to use only this name, right? So we have to type name, and here we put a equal sign, and just we use this object. And now if I print console.log name and run this program, you see it is showing name. So basically when you use curly braces, it will create an individual variable, and it will assign the object property with the same name to here. So for example, if I put it here name 1, it will not basically extract this name, right? If I run this program, it will show an error that undefined. So that means there is a wrong data, because within person object there is no property name 1. So you have to be very careful that if you want to destruct an object, you must use the same property name. Now it's working. So in case I want to use this country also, I just put an comma here and also use the country name here. And now if I want to print the country as well, if I clear and run this program, it is showing the country as well. So basically this shorthand function or destructuring feature, creating two individual variable name and country, and extracting this person object name and country and assigning the value in here. In React, when I was working, I see some common pattern. For example, suppose there is a function, arrow function, person name, and in the function, in the parentheses, there is this braces, and there is just name, for example like this. And this arrow function, what it do, it just simply print the name in uppercase letter, for example. So I actually see this type of code many cases in React. So within the parentheses, you will see this curly braces and variable name. So this is basically destructuring. So how we can use that? For example, if we just use person name, we just call this method function, and here we just pass this person, and you will see if I run this program, it shows Mahmoud in uppercase letter. So here when we call this arrow function person name and passing this object, and this object when goes here, it just extracting by destructuring this name property, and we are using name property within this arrow function. So it is a very common scenario, so you should be very careful and remember this destructuring feature. Like destructuring object, we can also destructuring an array. So for example, let's define an array numbers, and we just use square brackets to define and initialize an array 1 2 3 4 5. Now let's destructuring this array. So I just want this 1 and 2 number, for example. So what I will do, I will use const, and then instead of curly braces, in this case you have to use square bracket. So here I will type 1 2. For example, I need 2 variables, so I define the variable name here, and after the equal sign I just pass this array. And now if I print the 1 and 2, save the file and run, you see 1 and 2 is showing. So when you destructure an array, you just use square bracket, and the destructuring thing will happen from the beginning to end. So here I am destructuring 1 and 2 and passing that value to 1 and 2 individual variable. In ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2015, we use spread operator, basically 3 dot, and this is called spread operator, to extract each and every element from an array. Sometimes it is very important. Even when you are going to use React or React Native, you will see when we define state and we want to assign a new array, we will use spread operator. So let's see an example. For example, let's define an array const array1 equals 1 2 3 4 5. It's an array. Let's define another array const array2, and here we are assigning array1. So if I just output console.log array1 equals array2, let's see what the output shows. It shows it's true. So basically here array1 and array2 are the these are the variables which is bind to the same array element. So that means 1 2 3 4 5. So if I assign array1 to array2, it does not actually makes array2 a new array, not like that. Basically both array1 and array2 points to the same array. So suppose we want to push a new element, array2 dot push, and suppose it is value 5 or 6. And now if I just print console.log array1, you see the output, it's showing 5 6. So that means I am adding an item to array2, but I am printing array1, but I am seeing that this 6 is actually added to array1 as well. So that means array1 and array2 point to the same array elements. Now we want to define a complete new array with this element. Then what we can do? So for example, we are defining const array3, where we want all the elements from array1. So what we will do, we will use 3 dot, that means spread operator, and we mention array1. And suppose we also want another element in this array, for example 7, we just put comma and 7. Now if I print this array3, clear the output and run the program, oh, it will be console.log, not print. So you see now it is showing, when I print array3, it is showing 1 2 3 4 5 6 and 7. So this is spread operator, that means return each and every element from the array. And if I, for example, if I do not add 7, but I try to compare console.log array3 equal to array1, and I just print that, you see it is showing false. But in first cases, when we compare array1 and array2, you see it was showing true, but now it is showing false. Though each of array1 and array3 holds the same type of element, but actually both holds different array, not the same array. That's why it's showing false. So this is spread operator. We can use spread operator to extract array, right? Similarly, we can use spread operator to extract each and every property from an object, but this is not ECMAScript 6 feature. This is basically a proposal feature for ECMAScript 2017, but it's a common uses in React and React Native. I see many coded where a spread operator was using for extracting object in React Native code. So you have to know this, and you also have to remember that here in the Visual Studio Code Editor we are using JavaScript Babel, and when we use to write code in React or React Native, we also use Babel to transpile our code. So this spread operator can work with Babel because Babel transpile our code to the ECMAScript 6 standard. So let's define an object 1 where we have two property, name and price. Let's define another type. In this type property we pass a value groceries. Now let's define another object 2, where instead of using square brackets we have to use curly braces, and we want to use the spread operator object 1, and we also want to add this type property in this object 2. Now if I type console.log object 2, save the program and run, you see it is showing that name rice, price 20, and also added this type equal to grocery, this property within that object. So this way we can use the spread operator with object when we are using Babel. Modules are very important topic in JavaScript. When we use JavaScript or React Native to develop apps, we use other people code, right? So today I will discuss how we can create our own modules. So here you will see there is two files, one is demo.mjs, another one is person.mjs. Normally it should be JS. Why I use mjs I will tell you later. So suppose this person.mjs, there is two variable defined, first name last name, and a print function is defined. Now we want to use this thing in demo.mjs. Then how we can do that? So to do that in ECMAScript 6 you have to type export, you have to use this export keyword, then you have to use curly braces, and then within curly braces you can pass the variable or object or function name so that other code can import them. So here I want to export first name and last name. This is called named export. Now if I come to this demo.mjs and both file in the same directory, I want to import this code. So here I have to type import, then I also have to use curly braces, then first name last name, from here I will type person, just person, no need to give any extension. Now if I just type console.log first name and last name, and if I run this, you will see that for unknown reason this Visual Studio Code Editor shows error, but this actually ECMAScript 6 feature, right? It should work. I don't know why it's not working in this Visual Studio Code Editor, but when I use this feature in React or React Native, there was no problem. So for this testing I will use node environment. So in your machine you just open your terminal or Windows PowerShell, and then you have to type this node, then / experimental -modules, then the file name. If you run this, you will see that it is showing Mahmoud Hassan is printed correctly here. So basically node does not support all the ECMAScript 6 features. So this import export basically in Node.js experimental feature, that's why you will see an warning here, but you don't have to worry about this. This basically works in every JavaScript. Like when you use in React or React Native, you can easily able to run this code. Here in this person.mjs, if we want that we do not want to export this print function, then nobody can import that, right? So from here we cannot import this print function. If we want to export this print function, we can pass the print function name here, and we can import this print function here, and we can just use this print function. So if I go to my terminal, you see it works. Now another thing, if you want that when you defining a function or a class or any object and you want to export that, you can just use this export keyword before the definition. So instead of passing this print name here, I just put export keyword here, and here everything is same. If I run this program again, you see it is still working. So this is how named export and named import works. So if there is anything like function, object or class and that pass within curly braces, that is called named export, and you have to import that within using these curly braces. Suppose this person file, we are defining a class which is very important for this module, this whole module, and we also want to export this class. So we can easily use like the previous way, like named export, we can do that, but in this time we do not want to use named export. What we want to use default export. So to do that, we have to type export, then default keyword, then the class name. So we are not using any curly braces here. So now when I want to import here, I have to type import, and I do not have to use the curly braces. I can use the name like person from, and then this person. So now let's create an object const p equals new person, and let's provide a name A and B. And now if I call p.print method and go to my terminal and run this program, you see it is showing AB. So this is how we can use default export. So when you write a code or for a library or whatever, and you want to export the most important thing, you should use the default export. And in a file there is only one default export. You cannot use more than one default export in a file. And if you do not want to use at the bottom, what you can do, you just type here export default. So before the definition you can also write like this way, and if you run this program again, you see it works. So this is how the modules works basically. And one thing you should remember, that when you are exporting a default class or anything, here when you are importing that, you can write anything. Like if I want to rename it instead of person to like just capital P, I can also use capital P here. And if I run this program, you will see there is no error. It works. So the best thing is you use the same name that you using in the export field, and that you should use in here. A promise object represents an eventual completion or failure for an asynchronous operation. Suppose we are using an API and we are calling backend service from our frontend application, and we need a network request call. So normally before ECMAScript 6 we used to use callback function. That means when the operation done, we use the callback function to notify that the operation is done. But ECMAScript 6 introduced this promise thing and make things more easier. So let's write some code. So I am defining an arrow function, suppose const get data, and this arrow function will return a promise object, return new promise. So within this promise object we have to pass an executor function. So we can define another function and pass that function here, or we can just define an arrow function here. So let's define an arrow function here, and that function will take two parameters. One is resolve, another is reject. So in real world scenario we may use any asynchronous operation here, but for this demo I just use the timeout function. So I will type set timeout, and here at the first parameter I am defining another arrow function, and second parameter I will type 1000. That means after 1 second this set timeout function, the first parameter, that means another function will be running. So here I will type resolve, and I pass a string data received. So this timeout function works after 1 second. And outside of this promise object, let's define an object const data from server, and here I will assign get data. I am calling this arrow method here. And when you call an when you call a method that returns a promise object, that means that promise object will be assigned in this variable data from server. So to get notification when this thing will complete, you have to type data from server and you have to use the then method. So using then method, you can pass an arrow function. So you will type an arrow function with a parameter value, and here I just type console.log value. So that means here we are creating a promise object, and within the promise object, when there is a resolve method, the promise object will return from there and notify this then method, and when a handler is attached with the then method, that will get notified. So if I run this program, you will see that after 1 second this data received. So this is an asynchronous operation. Now suppose our network request get failed or any error happen, then how we can notify to the outsider that there is an error thing happen? We can also do that. For example, here I am typing another timeout method, set timeout, and in this arrow function I will define the functionality, and this timeout function will work after half second. So here what I am typing, reject, and with a message network disconnected. For this rejection, to handle this we have to type here after then catch method, and in catch method we can also use another arrow function to capture the message and define the body console.log suppose message. So now if I run this program, you will see this network disconnected message is come, but as this method is rejected, so this resolve will no longer work. So this is a typical scenario for an asynchronous operation. Suppose here we are using a network call, and when the data received, we will just notify using this resolve method that data received, so our operation is successful or fulfilled. And in case there is any error occurs, then what we do, we will use this reject method and we will pass the message or error message or anything else. So in the outside we will use then method or to capture the successful result, and we can use this catch method to handle any error. And there is another shortcut version. If you do not want to use this catch, you just use a second parameter in the then method. So in the then method, the first parameter is the successful, that means resolve thing, and the second parameter is the error thing. If I save this code, run the program again, it works. In case if I change it to 1000 and change it the previous thing 500, that means 500 millisecond, and run the program again, you see now the successful method or resolve method shown. Async and await are not ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2015 feature. It basically ECMAScript 2017 feature. So if you want to use this feature, you have to use it with the Babel transpiler. So here in this Visual Studio Code, we are using JavaScript Babel transpiler, so it will work. So what is basically async and await function? Actually, async and await function are built onto promise. A function starts with async keyword, means it will return a promise either explicitly or implicitly. So for example, let's write some code, const sum, and here I can pass two parameter in the arrow function, and this function will return a plus b. So this is a function. So if we want to make it asynchronous function, we just have to put the async keyword before the function definition. So here I put the async keyword. Now if I type console.log sum, and if I run this program, it shows that this is basically asynchronous function, not regular function. If I just remove this thing and run again, you will see it shows normal function. So when you use async keyword before a function definition, that defines the function as asynchronous function. So now type another thing, console.log, and in this case I will call this sum function with parameter 1 and 2. And if I run this program, clear the screen first, And you see now what it is showing, that promise with curly braces 3. So when I printing console.log sum 1 and 2, it is not giving me output 3, it is giving me output promise with curly braces and 3. So the interesting thing is that this asynchronous function, within the function body, we did not use any promise thing, but this function automatically returns a promise object, that is implicit promise object. Okay, so now if we want to use the result, what we have to do, suppose we are defining the result, const result and sum, passing 1 and 2, and if we want to show the result correctly, we have to type result dot then. Because result holds the promise object returned by this sum, we can use this then method, and here we can use a arrow function, and there we can just print the output console.log value. If I clear the screen and run the program, you will see now it is show 3. Basically this is an asynchronous function that returns a promise object. Let's see another example. In this example we are defining another function, power, where this will be also an asynchronous function that will take two parameter, num and power, and it will return a promise object. Here we will type explicitly return new promise, and within the promise object there is two parameter, resolve and reject in the arrow function parameter, that then we define the function body. Here we are getting the result by math.power operator, power function, num power, and then we are going to use resolve method and notify the value. Let's use this function power dot, call this function by 22 dot, and then we are using val, then arrow console.log val. So if I run this program now, it gives me 4. So in this case, in the previous case, this by using this async keyword, this function automatically become asynchronous and returns a promise object. And in the second case, we are explicitly defining the promise object and return the promise object, and within promise object we are using this resolve method ourselves. Now let's see another example. Here I am defined a get data method. It is also asynchronous method, and we are explicitly returning this promise object, and within promise object we define a timeout function that will call after 2 seconds, and then we are printing test1. Then here in this get data method we are calling this data function here. You see this data here, and this data will return a promise object, and that promise object will be assigned this result method. But before this data we are using await. So what does it mean, I will tell later. So and then we are printing test2, and then we are returning this result. So this result will be a promise object, and in the outside we are calling this get data method, and then using the then method we are printing the result. So if I run this program, you will see first it shows test1, then test2, then data receive. So that means the thing happened when our asynchronous function runs, the JavaScript first print this test1 method, then when it finds await keyword before any function, it just holds there until the function complete is its task. It no longer proceeds, so JavaScript holds there. So when data this promise thing completes, here you see the set timeout method we use, and we use the resolve method. So that means the data resolve thing complete, then the promise thing resolved, and the promise returned to here assigned to this result, and then the JavaScript goes there and prints the test2, and finally it returns this result, that means promise object, and from the outside we can capture the result via then method. So this is the await thing, and you can use await keyword only within asynchronous function. So it's a new feature, and many of us, when we write code in React Native or React, we are basically, when do asynchronous operations, sometimes we just use this async await thing, so that it makes our code much elegant and easier to understand. So I hope you understand the concept I already discussed. If you have any question, just let me know by asking comment in the comment section. So I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned and see you in another video. Bye.